This is my true story. They buried me alive for money, my own family, my wife, my sons, my daughter, the same people I fed, raised, and protected. They wanted my fortune, not my love. They smiled at me that night, then tried to put me in the ground before morning, but I didn't die. I lived to see their greed burn everything they touched, and after 5 long years, I knocked on their door. When they opened and saw me standing there, their screams told me everything. But before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. And don't forget to subscribe so more people hear my story. They said they loved me. My wife, my sons, my daughter. Every night we ate together. Every morning they wished me good health. They called me the head of the family, the protector. The reason they lived well, I believed them. I thought I had done something right in life, raising them to have everything I never had. But love has a way of changing when money enters the room. Their smiles were practiced, their hugs were rehearsed. Behind those words of care were plans I couldn't see yet. Quiet plans, slow and patient, like poison waiting in a cup. They sat with me that night, around my table, laughing. My wife poured my drink. My son served the food. My daughter kissed my cheek. The house was full of warmth, full of lies. I looked at them and felt proud, the kind of pride that makes a man forget his loneliness. I had built everything they had, the land, the company, the savings, all mine, all meant for them after I was gone. I thought they knew that. I thought they could wait. But greed doesn't wait. It whispers. It eats through blood and turns family into strangers. That night, I didn't see it yet, but I could feel it. Something in their eyes. Too much silence when I spoke. Too much sweetness in their voices. A stillness that didn't belong in a home built on love. After dinner, I sat in my chair, tired but content. My wife brought me tea. My sons talked about investments. My daughter asked if I'd updated my will. It all sounded normal. I didn't notice the way their eyes met, the quick glances, the tension in their shoulders. I didn't see the monster they were becoming. Because I was still blinded by affection, I wanted to believe they loved me. I wanted to believe I mattered more than what I owned. But in that room, surrounded by my family, I was already dead. They just hadn't buried me yet. That night, I went to bed thinking I was blessed. My wife kissed my forehead. My son said goodnight. My daughter tucked a blanket around me like she used to when she was little. I closed my eyes, smiling. I didn't know it was the last time I'd see that house as a father, not a target. I didn't know that love had already been replaced with calculation. They didn't see me as their father anymore. I was just an old man standing between them and their inheritance. Looking back, there were signs. The locked whispers when I walked in. The sudden silence at the dinner table. The missing phone calls from friends. The documents my wife asked me to sign without reading. I ignored them all. Because when you love your family, you don't think they're capable of turning your grave into their payday. You think betrayal comes from strangers, not the people you tucked into bed every night. They thought they were clever, planning it slowly so I wouldn't notice. Maybe they pitied me. Maybe they convinced themselves it was mercy, that killing me quickly would save me from the sickness of old age. But the truth was simpler. Greed. Plain and cold. The kind that turns blood into numbers. The kind that makes people forget who fed them, who sacrificed for them, who gave them life. If I close my eyes now, I can still see that night. The candlelight, the smell of roasted food, the fake laughter. My wife's soft hand on my shoulder, her thumb rubbing circles into my skin as if she was comforting me. When really, she was counting how many hours until I stopped breathing. That was love in my house. That was family. The kind that smiles while sharpening the knife. I used to think the worst kind of loneliness was being forgotten. I was wrong. The worst kind is being surrounded by people you love and realizing they're waiting for you to die. That's what I lived with that night. The air in the house was thick with deceit, but I didn't know it yet. I was a man too proud to believe that his own blood could bury him for money. I was a fool. It started with whispers, small, quiet, careful. I wasn't meant to hear them, but I did. That night, I had left my reading glasses in the study. I went back to get them, And that's when I heard my sons' voices. The door was half closed, but their words slipped through the gap like knives. They were talking about me, my age, my will, my accounts, the land in my name. My eldest son said it first. "Tomorrow night." His voice was calm, cold, steady. My heart froze. Tomorrow night what? I leaned closer. "We'll make it look like an accident," he said. Those words cut through me like glass. My own son, the boy I raised with my hands, the boy who wore my old coat when he couldn't afford his own, was planning my death. My blood, my heir, plotting to bury me. I didn't move. I stood there, my fingers gripping the doorframe, my legs heavy, my breath slow. I wanted to burst in, to shout, to demand why, but I couldn't. Something inside me cracked, and all I could do was listen. My wife's voice came next, low and steady. She said it had to look natural, peaceful, no struggle, no suspicion. My daughter asked if it would hurt me. My eldest laughed. "Not for long," he said. My wife told her not to worry. She said I had lived a good life, that it was time to let go. I felt my stomach turn. I had given them everything, and now they were giving me death. They talked about the money like it was theirs already, my accounts, my land, my company. They split it before I was even in the ground. They spoke about it like businessmen closing a deal. My wife would take the house. My sons would take control of the business. My daughter would get the insurance money. Every part of me had a price. Every breath I took had value to them, only if it stopped. I listened to them plan how to kill me like it was nothing. They weren't nervous. They weren't scared. They were calm, like they had been waiting for this. Maybe they had. I felt weak. My knees wanted to give out, but I forced myself to stay quiet. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just listened, every word burning into me. My eldest said they'd do it during dinner. Mix something in my wine. Quick, painless, easy to explain. My wife agreed. My daughter said she couldn't do it, but they told her she didn't have to, just stay quiet. That's how families die, not from murder, but from silence. She stayed silent that night. They all did, and so did I. When they left the room, I stood there in the dark, staring at the door. My body was shaking, but not from fear, from disbelief. The people I loved most were about to bury me. My wife, my sons, my daughter. The faces I had trusted for decades. The hands I had held through every struggle. I couldn't understand it. I had been strict, yes. I had made mistakes, but I never denied them anything. I worked every day to keep them safe, fed, and warm. And this was my reward, a grave dug by the same hands that once hugged me goodnight. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my chair, staring at the wall, listening to the clock tick. Every sound in the house felt sharp, dangerous. Every shadow looked like betrayal. I could hear them moving, whispering, preparing. I thought about running, but where would I go? They would find me. And even if they didn't, how could I live knowing my own blood wanted me gone? I wasn't ready to die, but I was ready to make them regret trying. By morning, I had a plan. A small one. A quiet one. I decided to play along. Let them think they were clever. Let them believe they were in control. They had forgotten one thing. I built everything they owned. I built it from nothing. I knew how to survive without help. I had faced hunger, war, loss. What was one more betrayal compared to that? They thought I was weak. They thought old age made me blind and slow. But age teaches you things. It teaches you patience. It teaches you how to pretend. So I waited. I smiled at them during breakfast. I thanked my wife for her tea. I hugged my daughter. I told my sons I was proud of them. They smiled back, thinking I didn't know, but I knew. And that knowledge burned quietly inside me. Not as fear, but as fire. They thought they were burying an old man. They were wrong. They were creating something they couldn't kill. That night, the house was quiet. Too quiet. My wife cooked my favorite meal. My sons poured the wine. My daughter smiled, but her eyes were red. I could feel death sitting with us at the table. Every sound felt heavy, like the air itself knew what was coming. I ate slowly, pretending not to notice the way they watched me. My wife kept refilling my glass. My eldest son kept checking his watch. I could taste the bitterness in the wine. It wasn't normal. It burned slightly on my tongue. I knew what it was. They thought they were clever, but I had already made my move. Earlier that day, I switched the bottles. The poison they mixed for me was now in their own glasses. But I didn't come to kill them. I came to survive. I wanted them to live long enough to see what they had done. I played my part. I pretended to feel dizzy, weak, fading. My daughter started crying. My wife touched my neck, checking my pulse. My sons carried me to my room, whispering about calling a doctor. But they didn't call anyone. They closed the door. I could hear them talking outside, making sure no one else in the house would interfere. They planned every detail. I lay still, listening. My breathing was slow, shallow. I heard them come in later, soft footsteps, careful movements. They covered me with a sheet. I didn't move. Not even when they wrapped my body in cloth and whispered that I was gone. My wife's voice cracked once, but it wasn't sadness. It was fear. Fear that someone would find out what they had done. They carried me out of the house through the back door. It was still dark, the air damp and cold. I could smell the soil before I saw it. I heard the shovel hit the ground. One of my sons said it would be quick. Another said they didn't have much time before sunrise. My heart pounded, but I stayed still. I needed them to believe I needed them to finish. They dug deep. I could hear the dirt falling beside me. I could hear their breathing, steady, focused, cold. When the hole was ready, they lowered me down. My back hit wood. A coffin. They had planned everything. I stared into the darkness behind my closed eyelids. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I had built a way out. I had prepared. The lid closed above me. The sound of nails filled my ears. Then came the dirt. Heavy. Final. Every shovel of soil hit the coffin like thunder. I could barely breathe. The air grew thin, the space tighter with every second. My hands shook, my body trembled, but I forced myself to stay calm. I could hear their voices fading as they finished. My wife said a prayer. My eldest said, "It's done." Then silence. Only the sound of my own heart beating. Darkness surrounded me. The smell of wood and earth filled my lungs. For a moment, I thought about dying. It would have been easier. Just close my eyes and stop fighting. But something in me refused. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was love turned rotten. I didn't know. All I knew was I couldn't let them win. I moved my hand to the side and found the small metal tube I had placed there days before. My breathing line. My escape. I had hidden it in the coffin's edge when they weren't home. They thought I was an old fool. They never noticed. I took a deep breath through the tube, air thin but enough. My chest burned, my throat dry, but I stayed still for hours. I waited until the sounds above me stopped, until their footsteps were gone, until morning birds started singing. Then, slowly, I pushed the loose board near my shoulder. Dirt fell into my face. I didn't stop. My fingers clawed upward through the soil. It was heavy, endless, crushing, but I kept moving. Inch by inch. Breath by breath, I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs. Every second felt like a lifetime. I wasn't digging to escape death. I was digging to live long enough to destroy them. When my fingers finally broke through the surface, cold air rushed in. I gasped. The light hurt my eyes, even the faint light of dawn. I pulled myself out, my body shaking, covered in dirt, my clothes torn. The world felt silent, still, unreal. I lay there for a long time, breathing, listening to the morning. Then I stood. My legs were weak, my head spinning, but I was alive. Alive because I refused to die by the hands of those I loved. They thought they buried a body. What they buried was their last chance for peace. When I crawled out of the dirt, the world looked different. The sky wasn't blue, it was gray, heavy, silent. The air burned in my lungs like smoke. My legs could barely hold me up, but I forced myself to move. Every step was pain, every breath was fire. My hands were shaking, bleeding from the soil, my clothes hung in torn pieces. I looked like a corpse that forgot to die. Maybe that's what I was. I didn't feel human anymore. I felt like something born again in anger. I looked back at the ground where they buried me. My name was on the wooden marker. My birth year. My death year. They had already written my ending. But I wasn't done yet. Not until they felt what I felt. I walked through the field behind the house, slow and half blind. My body ached, my mind empty. The world was quiet, except for the sound of birds and the crunch of dirt under my feet. The sun started to rise. Its light hit me, but it didn't warm me. I didn't belong to the living anymore, not fully. I found a river and washed my face, my arms, my hands. The water turned brown from the dirt and blood. I stared at my reflection. Sunken eyes, gray skin, a stranger. The man in the water wasn't a father or a husband anymore. He was something else, something that crawled out of his own grave to see how far betrayal could reach. I knew I couldn't stay near the house. They would panic when they saw the empty grave. They would think someone found out. They would try to cover their tracks, hide the money, erase the evidence. I couldn't give them that chance. I needed to disappear. I went to the small cabin I owned miles away, the one no one remembered. It was old, falling apart, but it was mine. I had left supplies there years ago: food, water, clothes, cash. Enough to last a few days. I locked the door behind me and collapsed on the floor. My body gave out, but my mind didn't. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying their voices, their laughter, their lies. Every word they spoke before the burial echoed in my head like poison. For days, I stayed there, healing. I ate little, slept less. My dreams were full of dirt, gasping breaths, and the sound of shovels. I woke up covered in sweat, still feeling the weight of the earth pressing down on my chest. Sometimes I'd scream without meaning to. Sometimes I'd laugh. I wasn't sure which part of me was still sane. But pain has a strange way of shaping you. It strips away everything fake until all that's left is what's real. And what was real for me was survival. I refused to die for people who saw me as a number on paper. When my strength returned, I made a plan. I went into town under a new name. I grew a beard, cut my hair, changed the way I dressed. No one recognized me. I found work. Simple jobs. Enough to earn money quietly. I stayed in the shadows, listening, watching. I learned everything that happened after my death. The funeral. The tears. The money that followed. They sold my company, my land, my house. My wife wore black for a few months, then married someone else. My sons took control of the accounts. My daughter disappeared into luxury. They moved on easily, too easily. None of them asked questions, none of them cared. They buried me, got paid, and started living the life they thought I'd left for them. It was strange watching them from afar. They smiled in photos, attended parties, built new homes. They looked happy. But I knew happiness built on blood never lasts. I waited. I worked. I watched. I built my own life quietly, away from them. I invested, saved, and gathered proof. Documents, papers, everything I needed for 5 years. I became a ghost with a purpose. They thought I was gone, but I was building something stronger than revenge. I was building truth. The nights were the hardest. The silence reminded me of the coffin. Tight, dark, endless. I'd wake up gasping, reaching for air, even though I was free. The earth had left its mark on me. I carried it everywhere. In my lungs, in my thoughts, in my anger. But I didn't want pity. I wanted justice. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't fight, just arrives one day and knocks on your door. That's what I was waiting for. The right moment to let them see what they buried. Not a dead man, but the proof of their own sin walking back into their lives. When the 5th year came, I was ready. I had the papers. I had the strength. And most of all, I had the patience. They buried me once. But this time, I was coming back to bury their peace. 5 years passed while I lived in the shadows. I learned how to be invisible. I slept in cheap rooms, ate small meals, and kept my face away from old friends. I grew thinner. I grew quiet. I learned their new names, their new deals, the places they went to show off what they stole. I watched their photos in papers and on screens. My wife wearing jewels that shone like the grave I almost had. My sons in suits that smelled of my money. My daughter at parties with men who gave her the look the way my sons had once looked at my bank accounts. They moved without me. They built lives on my bones. I watched and counted every small lie they told the world. I kept files. I kept proof. Evidence became my new treasure. The only thing I carried that was worth more than grief. I worked odd jobs. I fixed things people forgot. I cleaned floors, mowed lawns, painted fences. I learned how to hide my hands so no one would stare at the scars and dirt. I learned names that were not mine. I learned to answer to those names. I slept with the door open and never trusted a face. Men who tried to be kind looked at me like an old pawnbroker who had nothing to sell. I let them. Their pity was small and meaningless. I did not want their pity. I wanted them to watch. I wanted my family to walk by and never guess the shape of the man who watched them. I wanted them to live in the world they stole without knowing I could step into it and break it. I saved. Little by little. Coins under a loose board, bills folded in a hollow of a log, a small account in a bank under a false name. People think getting money back is fast. It is not. It is slow, ugly work. It demands you be patient, smarter, and meaner than the men who hurt you. I learned to be all three. I traded sleep for plans, comfort for a notebook full of dates, names, sums. I learned the law enough to know where I could strike. I learned the markets enough to hide the money where they could not touch it. I learned the habits of bankers and lawyers. I learned to whisper without telling a soul. I watched my family from a distance. I saw their fear the first month after my burial. They acted like it was pain in their chest, the kind that shows at night when lights are off. Then the fear faded. Money smooths fear. Money buys new women, new friends, new pleasures. They laughed loud at clubs. They gave speeches about charity, all of it paid for with the money they took from my life. They used me as a story of loss that made them look noble. My wife spoke of mourning with a voice practiced for cameras. My sons gave interviews about how they honored a memory. I wanted to walk in and shout the truth into their fresh faces, but I did not. I kept my mouth shut and collected proof. I let their lies fill the air until they felt safe enough to get careless. I learned secrets, the ones money cannot buy. I found papers that showed where they buried the accounts. I learned the names of the men who signed for my death. I found a stranger who swore under oath my funeral was real. I found receipts for new cars, for vacations, for real estate bought the day after my certificate was signed. Each discovery was a small victory. Each one tightened the chain around their comfort. They did not know the chain existed. They could not see the noose until I put it on their table. I carried those proofs like a hand weapon, quiet and ready. At night, I woke thinking of the coffin. I felt the wood in my hands, the nails, the dirt in my mouth. It never left me. The memory made me move careful and slow. Sometimes I walked past their houses and stopped to listen, the laughter, the music, the doors that slid open. I stood in the dark and watched through hedges while they lived on what I had built. I did not hate them the way some men do. Hate is loud. Mine was quieter. It was the hard, cold kind that plans. I wanted them to feel their loss without me taking their life. I wanted them to wake every morning with the sense of a ghost at their table. That would be my revenge. Not fire, not knives, truth. I grew older in those years, but my mind sharpened. My body ached, but my hands learned to move with purpose. The world forgot me. That was useful. Men who think you are dead sleep without thinking. They take risks, sign papers, move money. I watched them do those things, and I took notes. I waited for them to make a mistake. They did. Men always do. Money makes them blind. Greed makes them sloppy. It gave me what I needed: time. Time to gather, time to hide, time to plan. 5 years is long and short. Long enough for wounds to scar. Short enough for memories to remain fresh. I kept the fresh parts. I kept the anger that tasted like salt and iron. I fed it with proof and patience. I grew a plan that fit into a small leather folder. I sharpened my tongue to speak words that would break them without a single blow. And when the 5th year came, I left the little cabin with nothing but that folder, a clean shirt, and a voice that would say the truth they had buried. I walked toward the life they stole, moving like a shadow they would never expect. 5 years of waiting ended the day I decided to walk back. I dressed in a clean shirt, washed the dirt from my face, and cut my hair so I would not be a shadow at their gate. I walked slow. I wanted them to see me clearly. I wanted their eyes to find what they thought was gone. My hands held a folder with the proof I had gathered. It felt heavy and light all at once. Heavy with truth. Light because it was finally time. I walked past streets I used to know. I passed children playing where my sons once ran. The world moved on without me, but I was moving back into the place they had built on my bones. When I reached their gate, I paused. The house looked the same and different, bigger, brighter, clean. All the signs of a life bought with my name guard stood at the door like statues. Cameras blinked like eyes. I walked up and gave them my name. They looked at me like I was a stranger. That was the first thing I wanted, to be unknown to them. So many people saw me as dead. I used that. The guard checked a list, frowned, and opened the gate. I walked up the path where my own footsteps had once been light. The garden smelled of money and flowers. The house door was heavy. My heart beat loud enough to hear I knocked once. The sound echoed like a bell. Not many people knock at rich doors anymore. They press buzzers and wait. I wanted them to hear the knock. I wanted the sound that would bring what I had lived through to their ears. The knock came earlier than I expected. The maid opened the door first, then stepped back when she saw my face. Her eyes widened like a small animal's. News moved fast in those houses. I could feel her hurry inside like wind through curtains. The hall felt colder as footsteps ran. I could hear doors opening, the shuffle of hurried cloth. I heard the sound of people waking to a bad dream. I didn't move. I just stood there. My face was the same face they had buried on paper. I let it sit in the air like a verdict. I wanted them to feel that moment when the world you built checks the books and finds out who paid the bill. The door opened wider, and my wife looked out first. Her hair still had silver at the edges. Her face was practiced. A smile tried on, then dropped. Her hand went to her mouth. I saw her fingers shake. My sons came next, their suits sharp, their faces pale. My daughter behind them, pretty and stunned. For a second, none of them could speak. They stared like people who find a ghost in the mirror. Then the screams started, sharp, high. The sound hit the air like glass breaking. I had heard silence for 5 years, and that scream was louder. It filled the yard, the street, the empty spaces where my voice used to be. Neighbors came out. Windows opened. People pointed. I stood and let them scream. I wanted them to feel the full measure of fear they had given me in the dark. They backed away as if I would bite. My wife dropped to her knees. My sons held each other like boys. My daughter covered her face. Their eyes had the same greedy flash I had seen the night they planned. Now it was replaced by terror. Greed had hardened into panic. Money could not buy courage in the face of what they had done. Their mouths moved, but no sound came. I could see each thought run across their faces: the funeral, the signatures, the celebrations, the deals. All of it rushed back like a flood. I watched their comfort strip away second by second. It was swift. It was clean. It was truth arriving at their door. I did not shout. I did not laugh. I waited for them to gather their breath. Standing there with dirt still under my nails and the folder pressed to my chest, I felt older and stronger at once. Years of being buried teach you patience. Years of hiding teach you how to return. They expected terror and confusion, but not a calm man who came to show them what they had stolen. The maid shook and dropped a tray. The sound seemed small against the noise of their panic, but it added to it. Voices rose in the house. Orders, questions. The sound of people trying to make a wrong right with paper and money, and the sound of keys. None of it would help. Neighbors called guards. Lawyers came in small cars. Phones lit up with the world they thought would save them. For 5 years they had money, but they had no courage. They wanted the world to fix what they did, to bury the truth again. But the truth had found my hands. It sat in the folder like a stone. I lifted it then, steady, and felt the weight of every paper I had collected. I was no longer the broken man they assumed. I was the man who watched them live on his name, and now held the proof of their crime in his hand. Their screams quieted into whispers, not because the noise stopped, but because the sound of my voice replaces it. I spoke then, slow and low, not to shame, not to comfort, but to name what they had done. They heard their own names in my mouth, and the house smelled of panic and paper. The guards looked at their clipboards, confused. The neighbors watched like it was a play. The world they made to hide the wrong could not hide when the wrong came knocking on its own door. They stared at me like I was death walking. My wife's lips trembled, my son's hands shook, my daughter's knees went weak. The sound of their fear was thick in the air. Heavy and alive, I stepped inside slowly, not to scare them, but to make them see. Every step I took was theirs, not mine. Every inch of that house was built from what they took from me. I looked at the walls, the gold frames, the marble floor, and I remembered how I used to dream of peace in this home. Now it smelled like rot covered in perfume. My wife tried to speak, but her voice cracked. I didn't stop her. I didn't speak yet. I wanted her to feel what silence felt like, the same silence I heard under the dirt when they left me to die. I placed the folder on the table. It hit the wood like a hammer. Their eyes followed it, confused, scared, waiting for an answer that would not save them. I opened it slowly, one page at a time. Death certificate, bank transfers, land deeds, company records, all with their signatures. Proof of what they did. My eldest son stepped back. His skin went pale. My wife grabbed his arm, her face drained of color. My daughter looked at me like she was seeing a ghost. Maybe she was. I had been dead to them for 5 years, and now I was standing in their house, holding the truth that would bury them instead. I told them I was never dead. My voice was steady, calm, without hate. I wanted the words to land like stones, one after another. You buried me, I said, but I never stopped breathing. You poisoned me, but I swallowed truth instead. Their eyes moved from me to the papers and back again. My wife reached out, but her hands stopped halfway, shaking. I could see her remembering every lie, every touch, every fake tear at my funeral. The memories were cutting her open from the inside. My sons couldn't speak. They looked at each other like strangers, as if each was waiting for the other to fix what couldn't be fixed. Then I gave them the final papers, the ones that showed everything they thought they owned was gone. Every account emptied, every property sold, every share transferred. They read the names on the documents, names they didn't recognize, names I created to move the fortune they killed me for. My eldest dropped the papers. My younger son cursed under his breath, but it came out more like a cry. My wife's knees gave out. My daughter hid her face in her hands and sobbed. I didn't feel sorry. I didn't feel anything. I had already cried all my tears in that coffin. This was not revenge. This was the truth showing its teeth. I told them how I had lived, poor, broken, but alive. How I had built everything again from nothing. How I watched them waste my life's work on greed and pride. I told them about the breathing tube, the crawl through the dirt, the nights I woke up choking on the memory of soil. My words came slow, heavy, simple. I wanted them to feel each one. I wanted them to see the man they thought they destroyed, still standing while their world cracked around them. My eldest tried to speak, to justify, to explain, but lies don't work when truth is staring at you. His voice failed, his legs gave out. My wife begged for mercy with her eyes, but mercy doesn't grow in the soil of betrayal. I told them they had 5 years to enjoy their stolen lives. That was their gift. Now it was over. I handed them a single sheet, legal proof that the entire estate now belonged to a trust they couldn't touch. Their money, their houses, their company, gone, sold, stripped, erased. I didn't keep it. I gave it all away to the people they never cared about, the ones they stepped on while reaching for more. I didn't need the wealth. I needed the lesson to stay. I wanted them to understand that what they buried wasn't just a man. It was their chance to live clean, and they had thrown it into the dirt. My daughter's sobs grew louder. My son stood still, empty, lost. My wife just stared at me, her eyes hollow. She whispered something I couldn't hear, maybe my name, maybe a prayer I didn't answer. I picked up my folder, turned toward the door, and said only one thing before I left. You buried me for money. Now money will bury you. And I walked out into the night behind me. Their screams started again, louder than before. Not fear this time. Despair. The kind that money can't buy silence for. The next weeks were chaos for them. Their mansion that once stood proud started to fall apart piece by piece. The gates that once opened for rich guests now stayed locked. The servants left. The cars disappeared. The bank froze their accounts. The company they built from my name collapsed under the truth I left behind. I watched from a distance as everything they stole began to crumble. It didn't happen fast. It was slow, cruel, perfect. The kind of punishment that makes every day feel like a year. They tried to hide, but you can't hide when the truth carries your name. They went to lawyers, begged for help, but no one wanted to be part of the mess they created. Every handshake they once bought with money now turned cold. The same people who smiled at their parties now crossed the street to avoid them. That's how greed dies, alone, without applause. My eldest son tried to sell the house, but no one would buy it. The papers showed it wasn't his. Every signature was invalid. The money gone, the land gone, the name ruined. He stopped going out. People said he sat in the dark most nights, staring at the wall where my picture used to hang. My younger son tried to start over, but no one trusted a man with a dead father who wasn't dead. His business partners pulled away. His friends stopped calling. He turned to drink. They said he would sit in bars and tell people he saw ghosts. Maybe he did. Maybe every time he closed his eyes, he saw me crawling out of the dirt again, inch by inch. My daughter, the quiet one, vanished. The last thing I heard was that she left the country. But you can't outrun guilt. It travels lighter than luggage. It finds you wherever you go. My wife stayed in the house longest, the queen of her little kingdom, sitting in a throne of dust. I heard she still dressed for dinner even after the servants left, still poured 2 glasses of wine, one for herself, one for the husband she thought she'd killed. She sat alone, staring at the empty chair. The same chair where I used to sit. The same chair she watched me die in. I wonder what went through her mind every night when the lights went out. Maybe she saw me standing at the door again. Maybe she heard the knock in her sleep. The sound of the dead coming home. I didn't go near them. I didn't need to. I didn't want to see what was left of them. I had done enough. The truth I gave them would do the rest. Truth doesn't fade. It eats slow. It crawls into every quiet moment and reminds you of what you did. I wanted them to live with that. I wanted them to wake every morning and remember the day they buried their father alive for money and realize that the money was gone and I was not. That was the punishment they earned, life without peace. Months passed. The house lost its shine. The garden dried. The windows cracked. Neighbors stopped coming by. No more laughter, no more light, no more warmth, just silence. The same silence they gave me in the dirt. The same silence that filled my coffin when their shovels stopped. Now it was theirs. They lived in the grave they dug. Sometimes I walked past the house at night. I stood far enough so they couldn't see me. The lights were dim, the windows empty. I could hear movement inside, restless steps, soft sobs, whispers of fear. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel pity. I just watched. What I saw was justice without a judge. Life has its own way of returning what people give. They gave me a grave. I gave them a mirror. One by one they broke. My eldest lost his mind. My youngest disappeared. My wife fell ill. The world they killed me to build rotted around them. I didn't touch a single thing. I didn't have to. All I did was hand them the truth, and the truth did the rest. That's how destruction works when it's honest, Quiet, clean, merciless. People in town whispered about the cursed house. They said the family inside lost everything after the dead man returned. Some said it was superstition. Some said it was karma. I said nothing. I just kept walking. I had seen enough to know that the world doesn't need ghosts to haunt the guilty, they haunt themselves. Every night, every breath, every second they remember what they did to me. That's the real ruin. Not the loss of wealth, but the death of peace. When it was finally over, I went back one last time. The gate hung open, rusted. The garden was gone, weeds everywhere. The house that once blinded the street with its white walls now looked gray, old, tired. I walked up the path slowly, the same path they carried me down in a coffin. The same stones, the same dirt. But this time my feet were steady. No fear, no rush. I just wanted to see what was left. The windows were cracked, curtains half torn. The air smelled of mold and dust. The sound inside was only wind. I pushed the door open. It didn't resist. Houses always remember who built them. I stood in the hallway, listening to the silence that once belonged to laughter. I didn't belong here anymore, but I wanted to face the ghosts. Not mine, theirs. My wife sat in the living room, thin and pale, a blanket around her shoulders. Her eyes were hollow, her face gray. When she saw me, she didn't scream this time. She just stared like someone who had been waiting for it. She looked smaller than I remembered, broken in a way no doctor could fix. I didn't speak. I didn't move closer. We just looked at each other, two strangers who had shared a life and a grave. Her lips trembled. Maybe she wanted to say sorry, maybe not. The words didn't matter anymore. I had no anger left to give her, only a kind of sadness that felt older than either of us. I nodded once, slow, and she nodded back. That was all. No tears, no shouting, no forgiveness. Just understanding that everything between us was done. I walked past her into the dining room. The table was still there. The same table where they planned my death. Dust covered everything now. The chairs stood empty. The wine glass was still on the shelf, the one they poisoned. I stared at it for a long time. I remembered the weight of it in my hand, the taste of betrayal on my tongue. I thought about smashing it, ending the memory. But I didn't. It needed to stay there. Let it sit forever as proof that the worst things people do don't vanish when you stop talking about them. They live quietly in corners, waiting. I walked upstairs. The rooms were empty. My sons were gone. Their portraits were gone too. My daughter's room was cold and bare. I found an envelope on a table. No name, no address, just words written in her handwriting. I'm sorry. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Sorry doesn't fix graves. Sorry doesn't unbury fathers. I left it there, beside a broken lamp and a pile of old clothes. I went back downstairs. My wife hadn't moved. She was staring at the window, lost somewhere between guilt and time. I wanted to say something, maybe goodbye, but words felt useless. They had already said enough lies to fill a lifetime. Silence was cleaner. I looked around the house one last time. The walls seemed smaller now, as if the truth had squeezed the life out of them. This was once my pride, my dream, my home. Now it was a monument to greed. I had no reason to stay. I turned toward the door. My steps echoed through the hall. One man leaving, one ghost staying behind. I stopped at the threshold and looked back. My wife's head was bowed. The blanket slipped off her shoulders. She didn't move to pick it up. The light from the window hit her face, and I saw tears for the first time. Not loud ones, not dramatic. Just quiet drops that meant she finally understood what she had done. That was enough. I walked out. The air outside felt different. Cleaner, colder, honest. I didn't look back again. The door closed behind me, slow, heavy, final. I left the screams, the guilt, the memories where they belonged. I had carried them long enough. Some debts are too heavy for revenge. Some wounds need to stay open so they never heal the wrong way. I didn't curse them. I didn't forgive them. I just let them live in the grave they dug while I walked away free. The world was still quiet, but it was no longer cruel. It was just empty, and for the first time in years, that emptiness felt right. I live near the sea now, a small house with peeling paint and quiet waves outside my window. The air smells of salt, not soil. No marble floors, no servants, no noise, just the sound of water and wind. I wake early, make tea, and watch the sun crawl out of the ocean. Every morning feels the same, and that is peace. Real peace. The kind I never had when I was rich, when I was surrounded by people who smiled at me while waiting for me to die. The sea doesn't lie, it doesn't whisper. It just moves. I like that. I don't need much anymore. A chair, a cup, and silence. I earned my silence the hard way. Sometimes I think about them, but not often. My wife, my sons, my daughter, the family that turned my life into a grave. I wonder if they're still alive. I wonder if they wake at night, hearing the sound of shovels, the weight of dirt, the knock on the door that ended everything they thought they had. Maybe they moved away. Maybe they pretend I never existed. It doesn't matter. They will never forget the truth. You can't unsee a ghost that comes back breathing. You can't bury guilt once it learns to speak. That's the justice I left behind. Not courtrooms, not prison, but memory. It doesn't fade. It eats slowly, quietly, forever. People ask if I ever wanted revenge. I tell them no. Revenge is loud and short. Truth is slow and permanent. I didn't want blood. I wanted understanding. I wanted them to feel what I felt, the fear, the emptiness, the loss. And they did. I made sure of that. The world took from them what they took from me, not because I forced it, but because that's how justice works when it's real. It doesn't come with fire. It comes with silence. It waits. It watches. It arrives when you least expect it, wearing the face of the man you buried. Now I live alone, but I'm not lonely. The sea keeps me company. The wind carries no lies. Sometimes I walk down to the water, take off my shoes, and let the waves touch my feet. I think about how the earth once tried to keep me, how it pressed on my chest and took my breath. But it didn't win. I walked out of that grave, and now I stand where no one can bury me again. That's my freedom. That's my victory. Not in money, not in revenge, but in surviving what was meant to end me. At night, I light a candle and sit by the window. I don't pray. I don't ask for forgiveness. I already forgave myself for trusting the wrong hearts I already buried, the man who once believed love couldn't turn cruel. What's left of me now is truth, and truth doesn't need prayer. It just exists. I sleep without fear, something I couldn't do for years. The sound of the waves outside reminds me that life moves on whether you deserve it or not. I deserved peace. I took it back. Sometimes I see families walking by the beach, fathers holding their children's hands, mothers smiling. I don't hate them. I just watch. I wonder if they know how fragile trust really is, how easy it is to destroy, how hard it is to rebuild. People think betrayal is loud, but it isn't. It's quiet. It sounds like laughter at dinner, soft voices behind a door, a glass of wine passed across the table. I learned that lesson under the ground. It's one I'll never forget. I don't have much time left. My body is weaker now, my hands shake, but my mind is clear. I write my story down sometimes, not for pity, but so no one forgets what greed can do to love. I was buried for my money, but I rose with my truth. I lost everything, but I found something stronger. Peace built from pain. That's the kind that lasts. When I die again, it won't be in darkness. It won't be in fear. It will be by the sea, under the open sky, free from their lies, free from their hands. And maybe, if there's anything after this, I'll find peace there too. But if not, this is enough. They buried me for my wealth. I rose to bury their souls with truth. That's justice, not revenge, not anger, just the quiet sound of a man who lived after he was supposed to die.